Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Core Data Record, How Brokers Can Prepare and What It Means for the Lloyd's Insurance Market webinar. We're excited you've joined us and have lots of great information. First, let me introduce myself, and then I'll introduce our very special guest. My name is Mike Wincherly, and I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Novidea. Joining me is Paul Evans, our London market subject matter expert. Paul has extensive experience in the insurance and technology industries. He has over 30 years experience at leading software, technology, and insurance companies, with special experience in data migration, project and change management, solution architecture, program management, and much more. CDR, or Core Data Record, has been top of mind for brokers and insurers in the Lloyd's market, and many are wondering what the changes and impact this new standard will have on them. Today, we'll be interviewing our expert, Paul, in hopes that he will address your most pressing questions and concerns and help you better understand what CDR will mean for you. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Paul with our first question. Paul, what is CDR, or Core Data Record?
So, Mike, the Core Data Record is a new initiative as part of the Lloyd's Blueprint 2 target operating model, which is aiming to provide a more streamlined and a more electronic digital-first approach to the insurance market, which traditionally has been very much paper-based and face-to-face trading. And in order to move the market forward into a more streamlined, automated process, the CDR is looking to provide the key policy data that's required for processing of premiums and claims, for that information to be provided in an electronic format using the ACORD data standards, to enable that information to be validated at a much earlier point in the process. So currently, a lot of the information is checked after the placement of the risk has been completed, which could take several weeks, even sometimes several months. And after that placement is completed, that premium information is submitted to the Bureau for checking, and that checking is done very close or sometimes even after the actual risk has become effective. So the CDR is looking to validate that at a much earlier stage during the quotation process, enable that information to be shared between both the brokers and the insurers at the point that they negotiate and agree those terms, and make sure that everyone has the same information at the same time.
Great. Why do you think Lloyd's decided to finally implement this new standardization?
Well, I think for most of my career that I've been in the London market, the systems that have been in place have been there from when I joined the market at the very origins, which was at that time magnetic tape and punch cards, would you believe? So a lot of the systems were developed and designed in early 80s. And they've been running for all this time, which is a testament to those designs of the system. But unfortunately, as the market has changed and the market wants to move more towards digital transactional processing and more electronic trading, those systems are no longer fit for purpose. So there has been really a push to provide this better standardization, to enable the Bureau to become more efficient, to provide their services in a more timely manner, and also really to provide a much more efficient model for London that is competitive with other markets around the world.
Yeah, I can relate. My first job was at an insurer, and the systems that we used were a DOS-based green screen that I had never even seen before. So I can relate to the legacy systems that are still working successfully. What problems do you think the CDR will solve for the Lloyd's market?
Well, immediately it's going to minimize the amount of rekeying of information, because today, with the paper-based approach, you will send that document off to multiple insurers. They will then rekey that information into their policy administration system. The broker keys it into their policy administration system. They also get keyed into placing platform systems. So you end up with the same information keyed in multiple times to multiple systems. And of course, the problem with rekeying is there's quite a high potential for error. There's additional work, and also there's no single version of the truth. What tends to happen is that the information, you have to refer back to the document. that is your single version of the truth. So it's not very easy and efficient to be able to keep referring back to paper documents. So the rekeying is really going to be a massive benefit to all the parties. But the target operating model also has other significant benefits to the market as a whole, brokers and insurers. So speeding up the settlement process, due to the data being validated much earlier in the process and getting the data right first time, that means that the actual payments of premiums and claims to policyholders is going to be much quicker than what we can achieve with those legacy systems that exist in the market today. So customers will see benefits once the new platforms are and the CDR is up and running. Also, it provides a standardized way of working, because there are a lot of things which we call Londonisms, which are things that are specific to the way that London works compared to the US and Asia and other territories around the world. There are a lot of specific things that we do in London, and that adds extra complexity, adds extra processing, adds differences in terms of ways of working. So this standardized way of working is to say, how can we work in the same way for overseas markets as we do with London market? So we all adopt a single process. So that makes it easier for everybody, that there is a common way of working.
Yeah.
The next...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to move on to the next question, but if you still got more in there, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, again, better MI because of the extensive data that is captured electronically. And the final thing that I was going to mention was the improved handling of queries. A lot of queries are either done by telephone or done via email, and that involves a very difficult to track, what's in query, what's outstanding, who's it with, etc. And therefore, the new kind of target operating model is going to have a standardized portal where all the queries are logged and registered, and everyone will be able to see those queries and what the status of those queries are and who needs to respond and when. So I think that will just make the whole market much more efficient.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it definitely sounds like there's some real tangible benefits. What do you think will be the biggest challenge to brokers when it comes to actually implementing the CDR standardization?
Well, I think one of the difficulties is by moving the technology up to, the latest API driven, those companies will need to update their systems. No longer can the existing systems work in a model where everything needs to be API enabled to be able to load in the data automatically, create the policy administration system records automatically. So that's going to be the first area, is to make sure that their systems are designed to support both the existing processes and the new processes, because there's going to be a transition period over quite a number of months, if not years, where the existing policies and the existing ways of working will still be taking place, whilst the new policies and as we renew and as we process new policies, they will be processing against the new ways of working. So the system has to cater for both the new and the old. I think that's going to be a challenge, but also I think something which may have been overlooked in a number of organisations, which become more and more apparent as they get into the detail, is business change. So with capturing information at a much earlier stage, it means the people who normally enter that information and check that information are going to need to get involved in a much earlier part of the process, which is not the way they work today. And it's not the way it's worked in a traditional, paper-based sense, is that it tends to be that the placing broker will go out and negotiate the deal. Once they've negotiated the deal, they will hand it over to somebody else to then check the work that they've done and identify any discrepancies or queries. That process is not going to be supported going forward. A lot of the information needs to be validated and checked before it's actually transmitted to people, which is good because everyone wants good quality data, but it means that you're not going to be reliant on individuals just doing this negotiation on their own. They've got to work with the team to get everything checked and verified before it gets distributed. So again, that's going to be a business change to the way in particular brokers' work, which I think is needed so that we've got that good quality information.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I know you've sort of alluded to it with some of the legacy systems and some of the challenges that are faced, but do you think there's any other reasons why it's taken so long for Lloyd's to adopt the standardization?
So it's something which there has been prior initiatives in the past. So I remember back in sort of 2000, we had electronic placing support, and that was an initiative that tried to achieve what we're doing now, but the technology just wasn't ready. It required the users to key in a lot of information manually. There was no automation, and there was a very sort of clunky process of actually getting the information into the system. So basically the users just didn't want to use it. It just wasn't popular because they couldn't see the benefit in terms of the time spent putting it into the system, when they could take a piece of paper down, negotiate face to face and do a deal within minutes, whereby putting the information into the system and then waiting for responses, people didn't understand the information and therefore then was being done offline anyway. People actually found that that system just wasn't working. And I think the technology just wasn't there at the time. We didn't have APIs, we didn't have the automations, we didn't have the ability to convert documents into data. All of those kind of technologies didn't exist at that time. We then had a process called e-accounts, which was for electronic accounting. And again, it was available, but only for certain classes of business. And I think that was the barrier that kind of prevented a wider adoption, because the business felt, well, if I have to run a existing process for all of the lines of business that's not supported and a different process for what is supported, then it's operationally quite difficult for me to manage that. So some people implemented it and did realize the benefits, but ultimately it didn't get wide enough adoption because people wanted a single process, a standardized way of working, which covered all of their lines of business and not just business specific areas. So I think that was kind of why the previous initiatives didn't work or wasn't widely adopted. But also I think technology does play a big part, because I think that those systems were built upon the 1980s legacy systems, that the mainframes that existed within the market. And I think when you're trying to do a radical shift, you have to get to a point where you say, no, we need to rebuild those systems and adopt the technology at every stage of the process. And I think that's part of the reason now why the CDR is going to be successful, because it's going to be based upon a much more solid and modern technology than what existed previously.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, pivoting a little bit, I know we've spent some time talking about what CDR and its implications for brokers, but what do you think it'll mean for insurers?
Well, again, I think there's a lot of benefit that will be gained by the insurers, because firstly, they're going to receive the data electronically. So that will be validated, so they know it's good quality data. That will then solve any rekeying issues and any discrepancies on their data. So I think that being ingested at an earlier stage helps them to look at pricing and be able to automate some of their processes by taking in that data and being able to run through their rating engines and their pricing engines, and also to look at where they've got aggregates and where their business is coming from, being able to capture that information, having common data standards is going to help them with their analysis of the data that they're seeing at the quotation stage. I think as well as that, the information currently in a lot of senses is provided in PDF documents. So they don't rekey all of the information because it just takes a lot of time. And again, different MRCs may be in different formats and different layouts. So even using tools to convert them into OCR, into data, and loading that data, those have been huge projects that insurers have undertaken. But with so many different formats and so many different layouts, it's been a really difficult challenge. So for them to get their data in a single format, for them to be able to ingest in, is really going to be a massive benefit for them, and hopefully be able to achieve more towards the journey of being able to do more negotiations via platforms and via systems rather than kind of the face-to-face negotiations.
Great. And I know we've talked about insurers and brokers. Will customers notice any benefits and changes once the CDR comes into effect?
Yeah, I think they will. I think initially these initiatives have been really discussing what's going to be the benefit to brokers and what's the benefit to insurers. But customers, receiving payments much faster, knowing that the information where it is in the process chain, some sort of visibility of the process is something which I think customers have always wanted to see. But when you've got a very bad process, sometimes it's difficult to show people what's going on in the process because they wouldn't really understand why things take so long and why things are, stuck in a process. But I think once you have a more automated process and a more efficient process, then you can start to look at transparency. Where things are working in the process, and we know that the process is working efficiently, and we kind of have a better idea of how long things are going to take, then that transparency back to customers is surely going to be provided through, broker platforms and policy administration systems, etc. And again, that will then attract for the automation to happen more at source. Ability for customers to be able to notify endorsements electronically and put that information through the portals, which then goes through these market platforms to then further streamline the processes. Things like notification of claims and providing additional documentation, etc. All of those things are going to make the whole process much more efficient, but we need to have the solid foundation in order to give them the tools to be able to do that. So I think that's going to be something which customers will see over time, more and more of that accessibility and visibility of the data throughout that process.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, and I feel like you've touched on this, but I want to just kind of readdress it one more time. I know we've talked about the challenges that brokers will face with this and, some of the opportunities there, but are there any opportunities for brokers to use CDR as a way to grow and improve their operations?
Yeah, so I think that, the fact that there'll be a common way of working for both, bureau and non-bureau markets means that they will be able to process more business without having to recruit extra people to do that. So that efficiency is going to enable brokers to grow. That efficiency and streamlined processes is going to make them more efficient. And it's also going to make the consistency between the insurers and the brokers with that sort of common information. So I think there is going to be big benefits there to be held, to be accounted for through the brokers using that kind of common message standard.
Great. Pivoting a little bit here, I'd like you to spend some time on what do you think the role of technology will be when it comes to implementing CDR, both on the broker side and on the insurer side. I know you touched on some of the legacy platforms. I would just like to get your thoughts on how technology will play into all of this.
Sure. And I think it's going to have a significant role with regards to the CDR, because there is going to be the need for systems to be able to generate ACORD messages, to be able to send them across to the joint venture bureaus for the validation to take place. The information will go through Lloyds for their reporting and tax and regulatory purposes. The information that comes back from Lloyds will include some enriched data, etc. So being able to capture that enriched data is going to be important. I think also the fact that the transition is going to be a key area where the solution providers and their systems need to be able to support, because ideally what users want is a single way of working, whether they're working in the old legacy systems or whether they're working in the new CDR way of working. They want to be able to use the system in a common way. They don't want to have to plan their work out that says that we're doing it in the new way or the old way. They want to be able to have a consistent way of working, which is then going to be managed in the background by the systems. And so therefore the systems have to be API enabled, they have to be automated, they have to have workflow to be able to manage queries and be able to manage workloads and alerts and notifications. So There's going to be a bigger degree of reporting capability because of the MI and the information that can be used for better decision making. So again, a lot of these systems have to be adopting that modern technology in order to make sure that they can support this process and be able to communicate with the rest of the market using APIs.
Fantastic. No, that's excellent to hear. Well, thank you for all of your questions here, Paul. I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Any closing thoughts on CDR or how it will change the way brokers work, or it's just its impact in general on the Lloyd's market? I know you pretty much covered, but I didn't know if there's any final thoughts you had on everything.
Yeah, I think that many of the activities which are performed by brokers happens to be after the placement process is completed in kind of post-placement. Things like taxes and subjectivities, warranties, and so forth. Those are now going to be conducted during the placing process. So this is going to involve, and I mentioned it before in terms of business change, it's going to involve in a kind of a restructuring of the workforce, so that in particular large brokers are going to have shifting resources that are normally working post-placement to be working as part of the placement team, working with producing brokers, placing brokers, working with them to actually help them make sure that all of the data that's being captured is recorded and validated and right at the source, right first time. So as I say, that restructuring is something which brokers are going to have to factor into their plans to be able to accommodate that new way of working within the system as well. So I think that's something which will happen and something that is needed, but it is a business change that people need to be aware of and prepare and plan for.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the questions I have for you today. So thank you, Paul, and thank you all for joining us today. As you can see, CDR is going to have a major impact for brokers, insurers, and customer, and it's important to be ready and embrace these changes. CDR is also an opportunity to move the industry forward and away from legacy systems and workflows to a new, more efficient way of doing business. We hope you found this session educational. I know I certainly did. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us at novidea.com/contact us. And that's all I have for today. So thank you again, Paul. We really appreciate you spending the time with us and educating us all on core data record.
Pleasure.